The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Eliza Osborne's barren homestead, as she scattered the last of her husband's ashes over the dusty garden where nothing had grown for 3 seasons. The drought of 1876 had claimed not only her crops, but also her husband, who'd worked himself to death trying to salvage what couldn't be saved. At 32, Eliza was alone in the unforgiving plains of western Nebraska, miles from the nearest settlement, with nothing but memories and an empty cabin that echoed with ghosts. She sat on the rough-hewn bench her husband William had built in better times, her calloused hands folded in her lap, the ash residue still coating her fingertips. The land around her lay dormant like her heart. She hadn't spoken a word in 2 weeks, not since they'd put William in the ground. There was nobody to talk to anyway, just the wind whistling through the cracks in the cabin walls and the occasional coyote's mournful cry that seemed to mirror her own silent grief. The creak of wagon wheels broke the stillness of the evening air. Eliza didn't bother looking up. Probably just another traveler passing by, maybe a peddler with wares she couldn't afford, or worse, land speculators circling like vultures, waiting to snatch up the homesteads of failed settlers. She had nothing to offer anyone and nothing to say. "Evening, madam," a deep voice called out. "Hope I'm not intruding." When she didn't respond, boots scuffed against the dirt path leading to her garden. She kept her eyes fixed on the ground, on the gray ash that had once been her husband, now mingling with the dust. "Looks like your land could use some water," the stranger observed. "So could you, if you don't mind my saying." He set down a canteen near her feet, and the unexpected kindness forced her to look up. The man standing before her wore a trail-worn hat pulled low over his eyes, but she could see he was young, perhaps a few years younger than herself. Lean and tall, with a sun-weathered face that suggested he spent most of his days outdoors. "Name's Thomas Jericho. Most folks call me Tucker." He tipped his hat respectfully. "I've been driving cattle up from Texas, and my boss sent me ahead to scout water sources. Your creek bed looked promising on the map, but I see it's run dry." Eliza stared at him, her throat tight with disuse. She wanted to tell him to leave, that there was nothing here for him or his cattle, but the words wouldn't come. Tucker waited patiently for a response, and when none came, he glanced around at the neglected homestead. His eyes fell on the freshly turned earth of William's grave on the hill beyond the house, marked with a simple wooden cross. "I see," he said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam." Eliza picked up the canteen and took a small sip. The water was cool and sweet, and it seemed to loosen something inside her. "Eliza," she whispered, her voice cracking from disuse. "Eliza Osborne," Tucker nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Osborne, though I wish it were under better circumstances." As the last light faded from the sky, Eliza found herself inviting the stranger to stay for supper, though she had little to offer, just some beans and the last of her cornbread. Tucker insisted on contributing some jerky and coffee from his saddlebag, luxuries she hadn't tasted in months. "The cattle drive will be passing through in about a week," Tucker explained as they sat at her small table. 30 men and 2,000 head of longhorns. They'll need water." Eliza shook her head. "Creek's been dry for months, nothing but dust for miles." Tucker leaned forward, his eyes bright in the lamplight. "There's water underground, I can feel it. Your well hasn't completely failed yet, has it?" "It's nearly dry," she admitted. "Just enough for me and not for much longer. With your permission, I'd like to try something. My grandfather was what they called a water witch back in Kentucky, taught me how to find underground springs." His voice held no hint of deception, just quiet confidence. Eliza hesitated. Hope was a dangerous thing. Hope had kept William working until his heart gave out under the merciless sun. "What do you want in return?" she asked, suspicion edging her voice. "A place to water the herd, that's all, and maybe—" he hesitated. "Maybe permission to plant something in that garden of yours." Before dawn the next morning, Tucker was already outside, walking the property with a forked branch held out before him. Eliza watched from the doorway, skeptical but curious. When the stick suddenly dipped toward the ground, Tucker marked the spot and continued his search, finding 2 more locations where he believed water ran beneath the surface. By midday, he had borrowed her shovel and was digging, sweat soaking through his shirt as the hole grew deeper. Eliza brought him water from her dwindling supply, watching as he refused to give up. "You're wasting your strength," she told him when the sun was high overhead. "Better men than you have tried to make this land yield." Tucker paused, wiping his brow. "No disrespect to your husband, Mrs. Osborne, but sometimes it's not about strength. It's about knowing where to look." As if to prove his point, the ground beneath his feet suddenly darkened, moisture seeping up through the dirt. An hour later, water was pooling at the bottom of the hole, clear and fresh. "We'll need to dig deeper and line it proper," Tucker said, excitement making his eyes bright. "But your land's not dead, Mrs. Osborne. There's life here waiting to be found." That night, as they sat on her porch watching the stars emerge, Tucker told her about his life on the trail. He'd been driving cattle since he was 17, working his way up from wrangler to scout. Now 28, he'd saved enough to consider buying land of his own someday. "Why here?" Eliza finally asked. "This land's taken everything from me. Why would you want any part of it?" Tucker was quiet for a long moment. "When I was riding in, I saw something you might have missed. Wild roses growing along the edge of your property, blooming despite everything." "That's rare, Mrs. Osborne. This land isn't cursed. It's just waiting for the right touch." The next morning, Tucker rode out to meet the approaching cattle drive, promising to return in 2 days. Eliza found herself standing in her barren garden after he left, staring at the ground where William's ashes had settled. For the first time since the funeral, she allowed herself to imagine something growing there again. True to his word, Tucker returned, bringing with him seeds and saplings strapped carefully to his horse. "Trail boss gave them to me," he explained. "From a settlement back east. Said I was foolish to think about planting anything with the drive still weeks from finishing, but—" He shrugged, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "Thought maybe you could use them more than I could." Together they worked the soil where her husband's ashes had been scattered. Tucker showed her how to dig small trenches to direct what little water they had from the new well he'd dug, maximizing every drop. "Plants are stronger than people think," he told her as they worked side by side. "Seeds can lie dormant for years, just waiting for the right conditions." As they planted the last of the seeds, tomatoes, squash, and wildflowers, Eliza felt something shift inside her. The ache of loss was still there, but alongside it grew something new, a tentative hope. The cattle drive arrived 3 days later, bringing with it dust, noise, and men hungry for something other than trail rations. The temporary well Tucker had dug became a gathering spot, and Eliza found herself cooking for hungry cowboys who paid with stories, small treasures from their travels, and promises to send letters from wherever they finally stopped. The trail boss, a gruff man named Harlan, pulled Tucker aside as the drive prepared to move on. Eliza couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Tucker shake his head firmly. When he returned to where she stood by the garden, his expression was resolute. "They're continuing north tomorrow," he said. "Harlan offered me a bonus if I'd stay with them till Montana." Eliza's heart sank, though she tried not to show it. Of course he would go. Why would he stay in this desolate place? "I told him I had other plans," Tucker continued, watching her carefully. "If you'll have me, I'd like to stay and help with the garden, at least until the first harvest." The first shoots appeared just days later, tiny green fingers reaching toward the sun. Eliza found herself speaking more, telling Tucker about William, about their early years on the homestead when the creek still ran and the future seemed bright. Tucker listened, never pushing, offering his own stories in return, tales of trail drives and the characters he'd met, of thunderstorms that spooked the cattle and nights so clear he felt he could touch the stars. They fell into an easy routine. Tucker repaired the cabin's leaking roof and reinforced the windmill while Eliza tended the garden. In the evenings, they sat on the porch, sometimes talking, sometimes just watching the sunset paint the prairie gold. "I never thought I'd feel peaceful here again," Eliza admitted one night, the purple twilight settling around them. "After William died, I thought the land had taken everything." Tucker was quiet for a moment. "Land just is, Mrs. Osborne. It doesn't take or give on purpose. It's what we see in it that matters." "Eliza," she said suddenly. "Please call me Eliza." His smile in the fading light made her heart flutter in a way she hadn't felt in years, bringing with it a sharp pang of guilt. Was it wrong to feel this way so soon after losing William? As if reading her thoughts, Tucker spoke softly. "My ma lost my pa when I was just 10. For 2 years she wore black and wouldn't even look at another man. Then one day I found her singing while she hung the washing. When I asked what changed, she said, 'Life's for the living, Tucker.' Your pa would be the first to say so." Summer slipped into autumn, and the garden yielded its first modest harvest. Not enough to sell, but enough to sustain them and preserve some for the coming winter. Each successful plant felt like a victory, a testament to the fact that life could indeed return to this place. Word spread about the homestead that had been brought back from the brink. Neighbors who had kept their distance during Eliza's grieving period began to visit, bringing their own seeds to exchange and stories to share. The Osborne homestead slowly transformed from a place of silence and ash to one of cautious community and growth. Tucker proved himself not only knowledgeable about water and plants, but also a skilled carpenter. He expanded the garden's irrigation system, built proper fencing to keep out rabbits, and reinforced the barn that had begun to sag. One evening in late September, as they harvested the last of the summer squash, Eliza's hand brushed against Tucker's and neither pulled away. They stood like that for a long moment, fingers intertwined among the vines, the setting sun warming their faces. "I should probably find my own place before winter," Tucker said later that night, his voice reluctant. "People will talk." "Let them," Eliza replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "I've lived by other people's expectations my whole life. I'm tired of it." Still, propriety demanded certain appearances be maintained. Tucker built himself a small cabin adjacent to the barn, close enough that they could call to each other if needed, far enough to quiet the gossips in town. As winter descended on the plains, bringing with it howling winds and snow that buried the garden under a protective blanket, Eliza and Tucker spent long evenings planning for spring. They pored over seed catalogs that arrived via the monthly mail coach, dreaming of expanding the garden and perhaps even planting an orchard. "Apple trees take years to bear fruit," Eliza pointed out, practical as always. Tucker looked up from the catalog, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "I'm not planning on going anywhere." The declaration hung between them, weighted with meaning. Eliza felt a blush rise to her cheeks and for once didn't try to hide it. Christmas brought a brief thaw and a visit from the circuit preacher, who eyed Tucker with suspicion but accepted Eliza's explanation that he was a hired hand helping with the homestead. The preacher left them with a Bible passage about resurrection and new beginnings, which seemed fitting as they stood together watching him ride away. "He knows," Eliza said, wrapping her shawl tighter against the wind. "Knows what?" Tucker asked, though his slight smile suggested he understood. "That you're more than a hired hand, that I." She hesitated, the words catching in her throat. Tucker turned to face her, his expression serious. "Eliza, I need to tell you something. I didn't stay just for the garden." Before he could continue, a shout from the road interrupted them. A wagon was approaching, driven by a wild-eyed man bundled against the cold. "Fire," he called out. "Anderson's place is burning, need every hand." The next few hours passed in a blur of smoke, shouted orders, and desperate attempts to save what they could. The Anderson homestead, just 5 miles east, had caught fire when a chimney spark ignited the dry roof thatch. By the time Eliza and Tucker arrived with others from nearby farms, the main house was engulfed. They focused on saving the barn and livestock, forming a bucket brigade from the well to douse the flames that threatened to spread in the chaos. Eliza lost sight of Tucker. Panic seized her when someone shouted that the barn roof was collapsing and men were still inside. She pushed forward through the crowd, heart pounding, only to be held back by strong hands. "Let the men handle it," someone said, but Eliza broke free. "Tucker!" she screamed, the first time she'd raised her voice in nearly a year. As if in answer to her call, Tucker emerged from the smoke, supporting Mr. Anderson. Both men were coughing violently, their faces blackened with soot but alive. Eliza rushed to them, helping guide them away from the burning structures. Later, as they rode home in exhausted silence, Eliza reached across the wagon seat and took Tucker's hand. "I thought I'd lost you too," she said simply. Tucker squeezed her hand. "Takes more than a little fire to separate me from what matters." The incident seemed to break down the last barriers between them. That night, after Tucker had washed away the soot and smoke, Eliza asked him not to return to his cabin by the barn. "Stay," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Please." In the quiet darkness of the cabin, they found each other. Tucker's touch was gentle, reverent, as if he understood the magnitude of what Eliza was entrusting to him. For Eliza, it felt like coming back to life, like the first green shoot breaking through the soil after a long winter. January brought blizzards that isolated the homestead for weeks. They spent the time planning for spring, Tucker teaching Eliza about crop rotation and soil enrichment, while she shared her mother's recipes for preserving the coming harvest. "We should build a proper root cellar," Tucker suggested one evening as they sat by the fire. "And maybe expand the chicken coop. Fresh eggs fetch a good price in town." Eliza asked, watching him carefully. Tucker set down the piece of wood he'd been whittling. "I've been thinking about that, about us." He took a deep breath. "I know it hasn't been that long since William passed, and I'd understand if you think it's too soon, but I can't imagine being anywhere but here, with you." Eliza moved to sit beside him, taking his hands in hers. "William would want me to be happy," she said softly. "He'd want the land to thrive again, and it is because of you." "Not because of me," Tucker corrected gently, "because of us, together." When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and revealing the garden once more, they were married by the same circuit preacher who had visited at Christmas. The ceremony was small but joyful, attended by neighbors who had come to respect the quiet strength of the widow and the determined cowboy who had brought life back to her land. As a wedding gift, the community helped expand the garden and dig a proper well that wouldn't run dry in summer. Tucker used his savings to buy 2 milk cows and a pair of workhorses, investments in their shared future. That evening, as they stood in the garden where it had all begun, Tucker presented Eliza with a small wooden box. "What's this?" she asked, running her fingers over the polished surface. "Open it," he urged, a nervous smile playing at his lips. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a handful of seeds unlike any Eliza had seen before. "Rose seeds," Tucker explained. "From those wild roses I saw when I first rode in, I collected them before winter came. Thought maybe they could be the center of our garden, a reminder." Eliza closed the box carefully, tears welling in her eyes. "A reminder of what?" Tucker brushed a tear from her cheek. "That beauty can grow in the hardest places, that life follows death. That hope is never really lost, just waiting for the right moment to bloom." They planted the rose seeds together the next morning, in the very spot where Eliza had scattered William's ashes. As they worked, a spring shower swept across the plains, gentle and nourishing as if blessing their efforts. By midsummer, the Jericho homestead had become a place of remarkable abundance. The garden produced more than Eliza and Tucker could use, allowing them to sell the surplus in town. The wild rose seeds had sprouted, producing delicate bushes with buds that promised vibrant blooms in seasons to come. Word of their success spread along the cattle trails. Occasionally, cowboys from Tucker's old outfit would stop by, marveling at the transformation of the once barren homestead. Tucker would show them the irrigation systems he'd designed, while Eliza offered meals that made the trail rations seem like poor fare indeed. "You could make a good business of this," Harlan, the trail boss, suggested during one such visit. "Proper way station for drives coming through. Offer water, meals, maybe even lodging." The idea took root, and by the following year they had expanded the homestead to include a bunkhouse and dining hall. Eliza's cooking became famous among the trail hands, and Tucker's knowledge of water and land management earned the respect of even the most seasoned ranchers. 5 years after Tucker first rode onto her property, Eliza stood in the center of their garden, now a lush acre of vegetables, herbs, and flowers. The wild roses had grown into a magnificent hedge, their blooms a riot of pink and white against the backdrop of the prairie. "Mama, look." Their 3-year-old daughter, Hope, came running through the garden paths, her dark curls bouncing with each step. In her small hands she clutched a perfect rose blossom. "For you," Eliza accepted the flower, breathing in its sweet fragrance. "Thank you, sweetheart, it's beautiful." Tucker appeared at the garden gate, their infant son William cradled in his arms. "Thinking deep thoughts?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Remembering," Eliza replied, gazing around at the thriving homestead. How empty this place was, how silent. "Sometimes I can hardly believe what we've created here." Tucker shifted little William to one arm and wrapped the other around her shoulders. "You know what I think? I think it was all here, waiting, the water under the ground, the potential in the soil, even the strength in you. Just needed someone to believe in it again." Eliza leaned against him, watching Hope chase a butterfly through the rows of corn. "Someone to plant hope in the ashes," she said softly. As the sun began its descent, painting the garden in gold, Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of grief to the heights of joy, from barren ground to abundant life. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but standing here now, surrounded by the family and the life she and Tucker had built together, she knew it had led exactly where she was meant to be. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the fireflies emerge, Eliza took Tucker's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked, squeezing her fingers. "For stopping that day. For seeing something worth saving when all I could see was ash." Tucker smiled, the same smile that had first warmed her frozen heart years ago. "I just saw the truth, Eliza. That even in the quietest moments, even in the darkest soil, life finds a way. All it needs is a little faith, a little water, and someone willing to get their hands dirty." As the stars appeared one by one in the vast prairie sky, Eliza thought about the garden they'd tend tomorrow, the children they'd raise, the life they'd continue to build together. Where once there had been only silence and ashes, now there was laughter and growth, love and possibility, a garden of hope they had planted together, one seed at a time.